Hello and welcome to yet another brand new edition of Fortune India Boardroom. Today's subject, which we will discuss with some of India Inc.'s biggest business leaders, is the subject of uncertain times and leadership in these uncertain times. As we all know, the world has become a very uncertain place to do business in. Strategy is only as good as a couple of years at best, and leadership will be tested to the hilt because of that. There are global geopolitical uncertainties, there are domestic uncertainties and challenges. How do leaders in the corner rooms navigate this choppy landscape? To discuss this, I have with me Ashok Wadhwa, Anupriya Acharya, Sanjeev Krishan and Sudhanshu Vats, four of the finest minds in India Inc. who have led various businesses through various challenges and uncertainties. No one better than them to discuss this subject of the day, important subject of the day. And joining me in this discussion is, of course, my colleague Ajita Shashidhar. With this introduction, I will lob the ball to Ajita to take forward the discussion, and then we will keep it free-flowing, and we will discuss. Please feel free to intervene whenever required. So over to you, Ajita.
Thank you, Saurav. Sudhanshu, since you're right next to me, I might as well start with you. So as Saurav mentioned that volatility, uncertainty, they're all, have become a way of life these days. So in today's times when everything is so complex, how has your role as a leader evolved? How different are you now as a leader from what the leaders you have worked for were?
Yeah, Ajita, great question. Now, we've talked about VUCA world, as you know, and I think, we keep talking about that. So that phrase has been around for some time, but the importance of that phrase is getting felt even more. So I think it's getting far more accelerated with the changes all over the world, the geopolitical changes, the economic changes, the technology changes, the climate changes. So therefore, these are very, very and some of the pace at which these changes are happening have really caught on. I think the difference, Ajita, simply put, is that 20 years back, leaders were very well trained in certain aspects. Leaders were looked up to and expected to have most of the solutions, if not all the solutions. And therefore, but that has now changed quite a lot in today's area, because today, with the advent of technology particularly, and I can say this for myself for sure, when it comes to digital technology, I am invariably the least knowledgeable person in the room, I can tell you, because of my age. And also because of these uncertainties, I think the role of the leader now, in my opinion, has become more about being able to ask the right questions and not necessarily having the solutions. And the solutions evolve. So it's a paradigm shift, but at the same time, some fundamentals of leadership are not going to change, which is how do you take your people along with you? Are you empowering them? Are you trusting them? How are you building the teams? How are you building the capabilities which you are foreseeing, and therefore how are you anticipating some of them? Ability of a leader to sort of fold the future in remains consistent. Ability of the leader to be in the trenches and go up 15,000 feet and see that it remains consistent. But asking questions, being open, being flexible, being adaptable, and being agile are things which are getting tested and are in my judgment, qualities that are needed for the leader of today.
So is the era of the leader knows all, is it end of that era?
So I think depends on how you define it. I'm saying if leader knows all came from saying that leaders should have all the solutions, so that era is pretty much over, if that is what was it. If leader knows all comes from the point of view of wisdom, about ability to ask the right questions, about ability to anticipate some of the changes, I think that era is very much there, and that role of leader was there, is there, and in my judgment will always remain.
Coming to you, Mr. Krishan, I was just reading a phrase called, while I was preparing for this session, I was reading a report and I came across an interesting phrase called connector in chief. A leader is a connector in chief now. It was talking about collaborative leadership. So it'll be interesting to hear from you, does that phrase connector in chief really make sense in today's times?
Well, possibly it does. Let me just say, in my mind, the leader never knew it all, right? We have to be continuous learners with a pace of change, as Sudhanshu also mentioned. I think we have to, in some ways, respect that the disruptions that are going to come our way will need us to be in partnership with others. Now, those people could be within our organizations, could be outside our organizations. And that is how the collaborator in chief, what you mentioned, is certainly true. Because if I were to believe that I can do all of it by myself, whatever I have to do, whatever I have to achieve, whether it is change management in my organization, whether it is to grow at a particular pace, whether it is to look at any technical aspects, etc., we all grew up in a vertical manner, right? We have some vertical strengths. But today, to survive in this world, so in my parlance, it could be you could be doing tax work, you could be doing consulting work, deals work, whatever else. But today, to survive and to have those conversations which are wholesome, let's say even in this group, I think the horizontal becomes so much more important. And I think that's where collaboration is extremely, extremely key. You cannot do everything by yourself.
Sanjeev, if I may jump in on this, you have discussions with many of the top leaders in India in your role. What are the conversations you see them having right now as the world gets more and more uncertain? Across the sectors, there is nothing which can be really foretold. So what are the conversations you see them having without, of course, diverging individual conversations?
Well, I think the letter T is pretty much in focus, whether it is tech, whether it was Trump, whether it is tariffs. I think the letter T is clearly in focus at this point in time. It causes a significant amount of disruption, right? How do you plan for the future? And I think that's the biggest issue. If you look at the budget which came along, and clearly the message from the government really is that they would expect the private sector to do more. They have done a lot, they believe. They continue to put out a lot of money from a capex standpoint, but they really want the private sector to sort of come in and stand up. I have to say that at this point in time, because of all the uncertainty around us, I again see capital plans getting deferred by at least 6 to 9 months at the minimum. And whether things will stabilize, etc. We may not have an FTA with the US by then, for instance, right? So I do not know. I think that causes significant amount of uncertainty for people to take decisions, any long-term bets, and then you spend far more time on the short term. And I think you procrastinate on that when the job of the leader is really to think about long term. And then how do you lead? Because people are looking for direction from you. People are looking for vision from you, right? They're not looking at you to manage the day to day. That you have operating people and so on and so forth, etc. And I think that's where the job of a leader is far more harder today than ever before.
Mr. Wadhwa, nothing is more choppy than the markets, right? And you've seen it all over the several years. You've been both as a corporate leader and as a market participant and player. What is your sense? Obviously, markets are clearly interlinked with what goes on, not only in the corporate sector, but the world at large. What is your sense of this whole uncertain times which we keep discussing now?
It was about 30 years ago that I first learned, during my days in Arthur Andersen, a term called continuous learning. And I have to say that I have never felt the relevance of that term more than in the last 3 years. I think the most important thing for a leader today is to acknowledge that learning is a continuous process. And honestly, if a leader comes to a stage and thinks he knows it all, it's time for him to retire and say goodbye. Because in this world, and I'll come to the markets and the economy in a minute, but in this world, you cannot survive unless you embrace the term continuous learning. And learning, unlike in the past, is not just from a teacher or from one of your seniors or from one of your erstwhile bosses. It's now from anybody and everybody in the organization. Let's just go back to the economy and the markets and how they are behaving at this point of time. Let's not forget that we've had a phenomenal bull run in this country, right? Before the current volatility and meltdown, India was perhaps so expensive that we were all waiting to see when the downturn happens. In some ways, the downturn is a relief because it's come, it's arrived, and we are dealing with it at this point of time. The challenge is that in a bull market, almost anybody and everybody is able to price an IPO, a fundraising, and almost at any price. That's the benefit of a bull market. Good companies go up, but they don't necessarily go up at exactly at the same pace as the bull market is going up. But when the meltdown happens, and the meltdown largely happens because either stocks have been outpriced, or stocks that should not have got listed, or stocks that should not have been trading on the market are trading at this point of time. When that sentiment happens, it actually pulls down everybody. And the biggest loser in that whole landscape is actually very good performing companies, because they also suffer the same weak market sentiment and tend to go down proportionately when they don't deserve to really. At this point of time, you have three different factors that are impacting both the economy and the markets, I'd like to believe. I think consumption over the last 6, 9, 12 months has been perhaps weak and getting weaker. And that's demonstrated by the last quarterly results. Almost all consumer companies have shown decline in volumes. Very few have shown any real increase in volumes. So consumption is weak. I think Sanjeev spoke about CapEx. Government CapEx has been driving this economy for a long period of time. But we really haven't seen participation from the private sector. And it is very important for the next phase of growth that private sector participates. But how does private sector participate if it does not see consumption coming back? You're not going to create capacity if your existing factories are remaining idle, right? So that needs to happen. And then, of course, the whole world factor. We started with geopolitical challenges, and now we have Trump. His announcements, we can treat them as a bit of a rhetoric, but they have an impact. And at least at this point of time, they have significant impact and are creating uncertainty, which is compounding this uncertainty that is already there around us. I think all of that effectively means that we have to be extremely nimble-footed, we have to be far-sighted, we have to be very resilient, and I would say resilience is the word that every leader must embrace at this point of time. And we have to continue thinking forward. Times will not be exactly where they are. Times will move upwards and downwards. We just have to be prepared to be able to handle each such situation. And I think the winners are going to be those who embrace the concept of continuous learning and use this opportunity to build businesses that become more resilient.
Anupriya, if I were to come to you, so in this uncertain world, there are terms, we hear a lot of leaders using phrases like being agile, being flexible, being resilient. I mean, these are very often used words. So how is it in a day? I mean, how is it, if you were to look at Publicis per se, how is a day in your life, and what do you really tell your colleagues, as to how to navigate this uncertainty?
Okay, firstly, we don't tell our colleagues, we ask our colleagues.
Okay.
Because that reminds me, actually your question reminds me of a quote by Steve Jobs. We hire smart people not so that, we can tell them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do. But in any case, coming to uncertain times and this, a lot of conversations, we heard all these keywords, agility and uncertainty and VUCA world and all that jazz. To my mind, some of the few things which are different for leadership today as compared to what it was before, and I can talk more in relation to my sector, but I'm pretty sure this is relevant for all the sectors. One is, of course, I think the change is so fast, so swift. It has never been like this before. And I know that every era thinks like that, but the thing is that every era change is happening that fast. So, I was just reading somewhere, if you look at the adoption of artificial intelligence itself, that has been, has in the 5-year sort of cycle, it has really gone up, and apparently now at least 72% of the organizations are using some form of it. And generative AI, which is like a little baby in front of that and has come more recently, it has doubled now and is almost at 65% in just 1 year. So that is just to tell you the pace of change. And so the difference that it has created in the leadership is that you need to be almost anticipating what could happen in the world around you. So that it's not like something like an annual strategy or a 3-year strategy or 5-year strategy. You need to be ready for, you need to be anticipating, which means you need to be actively listening. And to your point, so one of the things for leadership today, and I'm not talking only about my role, but even our other leaders in the organization, one of the key things that we do is to constantly be in touch as to, in terms of whether it is technology trends, whether it is economic trends, whether it is, because anything can impact our clients' businesses and hence our businesses. So one is that. The other thing which definitely, and hence related to that, is also your strategic agility. Solutions which are working today are not necessarily going to be working tomorrow, and sometimes on the back. So one is you have to keep a close tab, but also be fluid in your actions. So for example, in a real world, for example, we'd launched a solution which was working well for our clients at that point in time. And we realized that, there was something else available in the market which was better. And we decided we'll partner and share the solution that we have. So strategic agility is very important. And then, of course, communication, because whatever leadership is thinking, it's very important that the whole organization knows that. So that has always been important. I just feel that the speed of that and how frequently you're doing that has increased for leaders today. And one special point that I want to touch upon on this whole VUCA, because it's close to my heart, is this whole, we talk about VUCA, we talk about of it as from an external perspective, like things are changing, hence leader need to change fast, and all of this is fine. The other thing is that it also has a lot of impact on the organization internally. So, we are in people's business, we are in a talent business. What happens is that it's all very well to say that strategic agility, open to this thing, change fast. It takes a toll on people because you have to, for leaders, you are making swifter and swifter decisions. People down the line are having to constantly adapt to the newer things that the organization is just sort of throwing on them, and the amount of learning that people need to do. And that brings in some form of fatigue. That brings in some form of, people feeling overwhelmed. And hence, in uncertain times and in times like these, I think one of the key things is self-care. And hence, the organization's role in ensuring that people are well equipped, not only for all these strategic changes, but they are well equipped also to take care of themselves. And I think this thing on wellness and, how they will sustain themselves in a fast-changing world, how they will conserve their energy in this thing is equally important.
So what do you tell a colleague who comes to you really overwhelmed? What really is your advice to him?
So, we realized that during the pandemic, it was a penny drop for me. I realized that it's not, you cannot be reactive to these things. And during the pandemic, a lot of organizations, including ours, we lost some near and dear ones. A lot of our people lost near and dear ones. And we realized that, a lot of times organizations are reacting to it. At least that's the world I grew in, okay? And so a proactive approach to your well-being is more important. So we actually run very, very intense programs through the whole organization to ensure that people are not looking at it as a last thing, it's not something. As an organization, people spend most of their waking hours in the office, and I think we are accountable and responsible to ensure that they are taking good care of themselves. To your point, if somebody's coming to me, actually they don't come to me because they already know we are passionate about this and we are already driving intense programs. We give them sound, bite-sized advice on longevity, on wellness. For the senior leaders, we run more intense programs, which are obviously they are older as well, which help them in coping with stress. So both physical, emotional, mental, all of that.
Sudhanshu, if I were to take off from where Mr. Wadhwa left off in terms of learning from everybody, what are organizations you think doing and what should leaders do in order to enable that? Because very often it's still top down, you have a discussion, the CEO or the leader discusses it, lays down the rule in terms of what the strategy should be. Whereas there are, like everybody is discussing here, there are very, very many bright people in the organization today, particularly Gen Z. Now, Gen Z is a subject we will discuss a little later during the course of this discussion. But what do you think leaders need to do to listen more and, sort of incorporate the views of the employees, the team at large in these times?
So Saurabh, I think as we were discussing, all of us, in some forms we talked about, and Ashok very rightly talked about continuous learning.
Yes.
I think for me, the learning paradigm has also taken another level, which is that you got to learn, which is to Ashok's point, continuous learning, but you have to unlearn. And I think unlearn is a more difficult part because, and especially when you've sort of done something for decades, in case of leadership, it becomes second habit. How do you try and come out of it, I think is important. The third piece which is there is When you then therefore get a team along, I think important task for a leader, in my opinion, is starting with leader himself, is having the humility to be able to acknowledge that I don't have the solutions, I'm continuously learning, my team is learning, and therefore building that atmosphere. And when you say building that atmosphere, it's open, you have continuous dialogue, you have a team which people learn from each other. Also, then the second task which becomes of a leader is more clearing the path. It is not necessarily, so it's not what you do yourself, it's how you enable others to do how well they do. And in clearing their path, because there are a lot of internal and external issues which people continuously face. I think that becomes important. And the third piece to Gen Z, and you are saying we will talk more about it as well, but I think from Gen Z, there is always, I have actually now, in the last 2 or 3 organizations, have had a concept of reverse mentoring. So, I have some youngsters who can teach me on many things. So I think, especially when we are talking about digital technology, it all began with my younger daughter, the way she used to play with BlackBerry. And I'm going now 15 years back with the way that I used to use BlackBerry. I used to find it fascinating as to how she uses those features so very well. So I think acknowledging that and working with everyone is important.
Sanjeev, in your conversations with the leaders, do you sense a feeling that strategy is now becoming very, very short-lived? You can't, those days of having 5-year, 10-year vision statements from corporations are a thing of the past, because you never know what will happen 2 years or 1 year down the line.
Yeah.
Do you think that sense is coming into the corner rooms?
Well, I would say, put it like this, that, you ought to have a vision as to who you want to be and what you want to be. I think that certainly is there. Now, I think the strategy, yes, you're right. I think because of all the disruptions that we are talking about, possibly needs to be modulated, depending on what's coming to you, right? What's the point of doing more with more? With AI, Anupriya just talked about it. Why would anybody want to do more with more? There is so much efficiency which is possible. Now, investing in AI, which requires significant investments, could be a strategy. People could decide that, no, I don't want to do it. I want to actually be the other way. So I think, the vision ought to be there, and I don't think that changes. But yes, how you go about, achieving your vision is something which possibly, could possibly change faster than possibly it happens. I've been part of some organizations, some organizational discussions where we said we will have a 3-year plan, 5-year plan, and so on and so forth, etc. I think they will have to be far more agile and nimble on many of those. But really the key is really today, if I feel, is execution of it, right? Whatever you strategize, unless you are able to execute it quickly, you are invariably going to be always muddled in your mind that where should I go next? And I think that causes a certain amount of, in my mind, it causes a certain amount of fear psychosis in management teams and others, because we don't know. It's okay to fail once in a while, right? If we will take a path. Not every time we will succeed, but failure is okay as well. But I think we need to get down to execution, and I do see a lot of teams who are in a state of inertia at times, and that's why they're not able to move forward. It's not as if that they don't understand that there are 20 disruptions. It's just that they debate too much. We are a democratic, country. We would want to debate a lot, but at times I feel there is an inertia also which hits people because of all the disruptions, and we don't execute well and at pace.
At PwC, also you've done the CEO survey earlier this year. The technology disruption probably comes up as one of the key disruptions which the CEOs are facing. Now, how do you see them actually, sort of coping with that? What is your takeaway from the India part in particular?
Yeah, I think it's very telling if you ask me that, because what 42% of the CEOs are saying is that they don't see their businesses existing in the same shape and form 10 years from now. Now, if my business, that's what they're telling us, that 42% of them are saying that 10 years business will not be in the same shape and form, I need to act now. Because the repivoting of the business possibly needs to happen today. I need to plan for it, etc. Change management in people, particularly middle management and others, is a huge exercise. And getting that change management done, saying that, okay, I will distribute my products differently, or I will go into different customer categories, or I'm going to, procure differently, or I'm going to deliver differently, I'm going to embrace technology. This is the kind of upskilling that I will do for my people, etc. I'm going to invest in it. Are all topics which possibly require you to repivot the business in a particular way. And I do think that if people have to, again, to the point that I was mentioning earlier, it's all good to say that I don't see my business existing in the same shape and form. What are you doing about it? Are you acting on it fast enough? And I think that again brings us back to execution.
Absolutely.
Sudhanshu, I would like to come back to you again. You said that it's important to unlearn. What are the 2 or 3 things you have unlearned in the last few years?
No, let me, I'll come back to that, Ajita, and I'll talk about that. So I'll tell you, and I wanted to pick up where Sanjeev was, and and partly I'll address your question, and then if it is not, then we'll pick it up again. See, I'll give you my example of, this is about 10 years, not 2-3 years. So when I joined Viacom 18, it was what had already been done by my predecessors was a very successful launch of the channel called Colors. And it is, the 8th or 9th GC to come in the market and become successful. And the less likely, there were other GCs launched with far more, fanfare, with leaders who had far greater experience, but that had been achieved. But we were a TV company. Now the question is that we had predominantly TV company, 6 channels, successful Colors channel which had got launched. Now the question to ask was, and I just want to build on Sanjeev's point, is that what business are you in? And I think, that's the question. And if you say that you are a broadcaster, because that's a term which is very often used, there was also, the foundation was itself called the Indian Broadcasting Foundation. So then you get trapped and you live and die with linear television. But the question you had to see is, and it had not come to India fully still, about 12 years back, but it was there in the world. It's not that it was new to the world. But you said that digital is coming, and therefore what is most important is content. How you will deliver that content will keep changing. And therefore we said to ourselves that we are a company that is in the business of storytelling. And very simply put, our job is to take good stories to the audience, and all audience to good stories. Frankly, I'm saying that's what we do. And then you open up the entire piece, and then you get into, so when we started doing Boot, which was very early days, most people were not convinced. A lot of people in the boardroom were not convinced. Some of the partners were not that convinced, but we said this is the way to go. And in terms of talent, again, we didn't have that talent. We had fantastic, right-brain talent, which is basically people who were good, creative people. But we picked up a few people who were curious, who could do that, and I will take the liberty of naming a few. So, Gaurav Gandhi, who had done earlier traditional stuff, but he jumped in. And he helped build the platform, and of course he's now in Amazon Prime, as you know. I remember my conversation with Monica Shergill, and she was doing television. And she said, why would I do digital, Sudhanshu? And it was a 2 hours conversation. Now every time she meets me, she heads up Netflix in India. She said that conversation, Sudhanshu, was pivotal. So what I'm saying is it's about being able to do that. So as an organization, we were unlearning that. To my very specific personal question, Ajita, and that's a great question, and again go to that period. I had come in from Unilever, and Unilever or Hindustan Lever in those days when we had joined had exceptionally high level of talent, but it was a talent of a particular type, engineer, MBA, most of them, and sometimes IIT, IIM. So I'm saying and sometimes even which IIT, which IIM. So but then I came in, so therefore unlearning for me, and I think that was, and I'm very grateful for that, is when I saw talent at Viacom 18, it was a different talent. And it took me some time to internalize it for 6 odd months, but I said they're very talented people. Some of them were dropouts, but they were so extremely talented people. So I think that how you look at talent, the definition of talent was a learning or an unlearning and then relearning kind of stuff, if I could use a personal example.
Mr. Wadhwa, just to continue for a minute on that, I think the 2 most unlearning experiences for me have been, when I grew up, you always waited for the boss or the head of the table to first speak. And that's how we all grew up, right? So the question came on the table, a debate began, and you first gave your point of view. And over the years, one has learned that that's absolutely the worst thing you can do, because it then influences everybody's thinking and opinion, because everybody's converging to your way of thinking versus putting their point of view forward. So the first most important unlearning was, I'm going to be the last one to speak. I'm not going to be the first one to speak, because I don't want to prevent the talent in the room from contributing what their genuine views and feelings. The second most important unlearning was, we all grew up having executive assistants. And at one point of time, our executive assistants were those who kind of did partly professional, partly support type of function, right? Somewhere in between that. And you soon learned, and I guess as we all learned to type better thanks to the leverage of technology, we all learned that we really don't need the Ambit piece. Now, typically, the assistant that you pick is in his early to late 20s, because that whole concept of he needs to know enough for me to be able to relate to him is gone. Actually, he doesn't need to know enough, because if he knows enough, then it's a lot of what you already know.
Yes. That's a
If you
great
really
point,
want
Ashok.
to learn something completely new, you have to get a person who doesn't know much.
Yes.
Because that's when he will come with fresh ideas and fresh thoughts. So a typical, my new assistants are all under 25. And I tell you, the amount I learned from them in just pure analytics is phenomenal. I mean, that old concept of putting things on a spreadsheet and trying to work it out is gone, long gone. These guys are smart, they're quick, they pick things up very fast. And it's been one of the greatest contributors to my learning and my ability to be able to run my organization. So those are two big unlearnings for me.
Absolutely with you on both these points, Mr. Wadhwa. I wanted to take up that whole piece on talent. Today in these times, how do you then pick the talent? Because, it's not enough to have talent from the same, like you said, people are teaching you so much and you're learning from them. How does one then pick? Is it also important to pick outside the sector you're working in, so that new, fresh ideas from the outside come in? How important is that?
Absolutely right. But before I address how you pick the talent, let me tell you some other challenge. Many of us are in services industry, therefore obviously people are everything that we have. The biggest challenge today is how do you retain talent? Even more important than how you recruit talent. I mean, I'll just give you an example. The sales staff in a bank or a non-banking finance lending company, the attrition rates are 90% plus. 90% plus.
9 out of 10 people gone in a
9
year.
out of 10 people are gone. What's the average tenure of a person who stays there? 6 months. What's the average tenure for a person to become productive in a lending business? 9 months. Effectively, you are losing money on every individual that you recruit, because before he's paid you back, the investment in acquiring him, he's gone. And therefore you're recruiting somebody else. I think the biggest challenge today we have in largely that retail sales force is retaining talent. And by the way, that challenge is not limited just to that sales force. I'm sure all of you will recognize that today's talent is very movable. There was a concept of job loyalty. There was a concept of wanting to build a career. Organizations like Citibank, Anderson's, Price Waterhouse, Levers build that longevity. That's gone. That's absolutely gone. Today's average age, if you can get somebody stay on for 5 years, you've done well for yourself. So the competitiveness has actually led to talent moving rapidly, and therefore retention is as much of a question as recruitment. When it comes specifically to recruitment, I totally agree. We cannot, there is no tailor-made formula anymore. The classic IIT, IIM, the classic, he studied in Wharton or Harvard and therefore he'll do good for me. I think recent events have completely broken all those myths. Today you pick person because you feel he fits the job. Many of the bankers that we recruit today are no longer from the banking industry. We actually recruit them from corporates. Many of the people that are today running our research department are no longer coming from equities businesses. They're actually coming from companies. Many of the people that I lose today, my research analysts, are actually not going and joining some other competitor. They're going and joining corporates as CFOs and as relationship people. So I think talent today is viewed independently of the qualification or the background from where it comes. I think everybody is trying to figure out what is the requirement, and anybody who fits that requirement, regardless of whether he's educated, less educated, more educated here or there, irrelevant. Let's go recruit the person.
It's also very important, Mr. Wadhwa, that you talked about attrition, because in that space, how does a leader then look at a talent pipeline, succession planning? All that goes out of the window, right? If you are saying that this is the kind of the data and the statistics are shocking actually in some of these sectors, how does one as a CEO or as a leader then plan, the whole talent pipeline? It becomes very, very challenging.
So the famous saying, the challenges of success are more difficult to handle than the challenges of failure. You've got to first embrace that. True. The moment your business, your organization, the industry, the economy is moving upwards fast, you have to recognize that you have to plan for attrition. You have to hedge your bets. You have to plan on how the succession will happen when people leave, because the best of your talent and the most loyal of your talent is in this day and era, very fungible. They'll move to the best next job that they get.
I think,
Yeah, Anupriya, I wanted to ask you exactly the question on, talent retention, and I know, marketing communications has evolved quite a bit. Earlier, you would only go to a school like MICA to hire. Now you even go to tech schools, and for a typical techie, I don't think, joining a marketing communications company would be the first priority. They would either join a TCS or a Infosys or whatever. So what kind of a challenge do you face to retain your talent? What do you tell them?
So this is a question very close to my heart, and it's a very interesting question for anybody who is in the talent business, which is 100% of the companies.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'll answer both parts of it. One is the acquisition, and one is the retention. On the acquisition bit, I think these days, and I think Ashok touched upon it, the boundaries between industries in that sense are merging a bit. And for example, technology is impacting every sector. And so it is but obvious that you will need to have people who come from that background. And there's a lot of change that we've seen in our industry as well. And definitely I can talk of Publicis because I've been here now for 11 years. So first I'll talk about the leadership teams, because a lot of the strategy that you drive is still coming from there. So in our leadership teams, the kind of people that we have now, so first we started with ensuring that we had the right talent acquisition team. Earlier in our services, it used to be like, okay, just hire from this competitor, that competitor, and that competitor. But we are not competing in that space any longer. We are competing in many other spaces. So we are competing in consulting, we are competing in technology, we are competing in, solution providing space, many other spaces beyond the classic advertising. And large part of our revenues actually come from there. So today in our leadership team, for example, we have a chief technology officer, which in our sector, no such, position has ever been there. So we have a chief technology officer who comes with almost 25 years of background, half of which is in solution building in the US, but that's how fast technology is moving. And he's core to our leadership team and not somebody who looks at technology later. So he's part of our product and solution building. He's part of the core strategy, and he runs obviously a tech council. Similarly, for one of the largest digital marketing shops that we have, which is Performix, when we had a leadership change, a lot of our people are entrepreneurs who have run their own companies and come to us, and they sort of gel well. We looked at totally outside of the industry. So we realized that there is only this much of pool, like he talked about, that, it's the same cut of people. And, in decision making, in strategy, you cannot have great strategic solution coming out if you are referring to the same people again and again. Yeah. So in that sense, your talent acquisition teams and the talent you bring onto the table has to be coming from far and wide. So half the people in our leadership teams are people who have nothing to do with advertising at all. And that, and obviously the statistics clearly have been proven that there's a direct correlation between the diversity of thought that you have in your organization vis-a-vis the financial performance of the company. So I don't think there is any argument on that any longer. Coming to the larger workforce, and to your point that, it's inspiring to see how we talked about Gen Z, it's inspiring to see how they are not so sort of, they are not into squares and blocks like the past. They want to explore exactly what they would like to do. So we have more and more people applying to us from backgrounds which are totally different. So we have people coming from, the School of Design in New York who want to be into advertising despite the fact that they can, any company can take them from premier businesses. We hire a lot of engineers. They do not want to go to sometimes purely tech companies because they find them boring and they find them pretty distinct. And I'm pretty sure there must be a set of advertising people who must be wanting to quit advertising, go elsewhere. The good thing about the younger generation is that they are very open to, defining their own career paths and not be sort of, guided by what the parents or the society expects them to do. I'll cut to the engagement part. I think that's one of the key things. I was very happy to hear that banking has worse figures than advertising. So, our attrition, if it touches 40%, we are like already very worried. But now 90%, I feel better. So, I think it is important to listen to the employees. So towards that, we have very extensive survey, pulse surveys, which are like anonymous surveys twice a year. And you can put in, how is it that you're feeling about everything. So there are some 3-4 buckets under which we put those questions. We ensure that a lot more people are answering those, because there's no point in doing a survey with 5. So 80-90% of the organization actually completes all that survey. And then we actually go through that, look at areas that we're doing very well in, areas which we are not doing well. And it is again cascaded in a whole town hall, which are the areas that we need further progress on. So it's not something, strategy today or leadership today is not about just speaking in closed doors. It's also about ensuring that people feel empowered and they feel connected to the whole organization and where the organization is headed. And we have seen that our engagement rates, firstly, we take them very seriously. And of course, compensation is extremely important. But surprisingly, what also comes out that the investment that you do on learning and development, the kind of culture that you're going to provide in the company, diversity, areas that are important to those people, whether the company cares about that, all these are very important. And a lot of solutions actually are not coming from the top. The solutions are then co-curated and created with our younger lot. So we also have like a next generation board, which are people in their early 30s. And so some of the biggest challenges of the organization are formally thrown out to these cohorts. And they, among themselves sort of discuss and come back with solutions. So these are some of the things that we are doing to ensure that our talent is both engaged and we have a wide variety of talent coming in.
So what really is the role of the next generation board?
So next generation board, as I said, so firstly, we want people to lean in. So this is not something that you're very high performing, let me give you a badge. It is something that so it is open to people in a certain sort of seniority level, and which is much lesser than, for example, the typical senior leaders. So it's open to that band, and people need to opt in for that they want to apply for it. So we had a massive round of applications, and then one of the things in that was also, it was like a contest. People also had to sort of answer and pitch as to why they believed that they were the right choice for the NGB and things like that. And through a full selection process, when we finalized, to the NGB, for example, we have like 3 cohorts. One of the things that, for example, we've just launched an innovation center, which is a physical space to drive the culture of innovation. And it's like la-di-da with a lot of technology and cool stuff and all of that. Because people are not dying to come to office post the pandemic. If you make it engaging and creative, then they obviously are trying to be there. So now they've done, so the challenge given to them was, how do we ensure that it is not just a place where people just come and say, oh, how does it become like the ethos within the organization and a part of the awareness of the whole organization, part of being of that whole organization where it can drive innovation culture. For another group, for example, we've given, including like this, the latest survey which has come out, the areas that are not doing that well, how can we address some of those areas? Because they understand the ethos of all those people way better than we possibly sitting in the boardrooms.
So taking
Sanjeev, if I can just ask you about this important area of skilling, because from all the discussions which we are talking about, including bringing in people from outside, the Gen Z part of it, skilling is becoming a very, very important challenge and an area which leaders have to work towards. What is your sense of how leaders are approaching this?
Well, like you nurture a plant, you have to nurture your resources. And I don't think that whether you're in a people organization, like, Ashok was mentioning as well, but for everybody, we have had industry leaders who have a lot of blue-collar employees saying that because of lack of skilled manpower, their business is suffering.
Yes.
So you can just imagine that whether it is a blue collar or white collar, I think upskilling is the biggest need. And I can safely say that for us, the biggest investment is not necessarily going to be in filling up our white spaces, etc. It's also going to be about skilling our people in the way that they are disrupted. And also, as I said, we all grow vertically, but how do we have a horizontal mindset? So yes, AI and other things are very, very important. but also how do you have a horizontal mindset? Because if the clients are telling us that 40% of them are disrupted, I need to be able to converse with them that, okay, what will make you come out of this state of despair? And I think for that, I need to skill my people in a very, very different way than we have possibly done today. The traditional technical training is there, but I think today the other training is far more important, which will make them more horizontal and globally minded. I think the one other thing which I would say, particularly when it comes to skilling people, I think today there is also an expectation. We're talking about retention. Unless you actually give them the upskilling, unless you focus on their well-being from a knowledge awareness standpoint, you will possibly lose people. Exactly. So it has actually become a defensive mechanism, not an aggressive mechanism.
I think just sort of to build on this one, I think, and looking at it from another dimension, because sometimes we don't see it like that, is in Pidilite, for instance, we've now partnered the first skilling university in Ahmedabad, where we've set up a Pidilite woodworking and plumbing institute for advanced skills, where you get a graduate degree, a master's degree and all that. And these are kids who come in who've not done conventional schooling. Many of them have just about done class 10 or some have even not done that. But need of the hour, to Sanjeev's point, is at all levels. And frankly, for a country like India, with some of the demographic pieces we have, there are areas where we can all contribute into these, because not only will we do justice to them for their livelihood, for their growth, and build a relationship and bond with them as a company, and therefore helps the company in that sense. But you'd be surprised that some of these kids now go for international competitions, and therefore India, with its young force, I think has a potential in this space, because where labor is needed, where skilled pieces are needed, and some of these are unlikely to be done by robos in a hurry. Now, of course, everything will happen, but it is not so, because when you have to use all your other things. So that's an interesting piece I thought to add.
I think, honestly, that's a very important point, Saurabh, because I think corporates have to realize that their responsibility has grown far beyond the traditional canvas.
Yes.
At one stage, you would say, I would partner with some other college and I'll do something XYZ. Today, you have to innovate. You have to determine what you need today and what you shall need tomorrow, and you have to plan for that. And if that means, in my business, because we deal with ultra high net worth individuals, you have to send your people for training in, how to have some culinary skills, because that's a great topic of discussion with ultra high net worth individuals, well, you better get that done. It's no longer an expectation that they will come with that skill. Yeah. And if that's what your business needs, you better be prepared to say, I'm going to invest in that.
But how important also, Mr. Wadhwa, is intrapreneurship? Because a lot of these younger people, they want to also branch out and do new things even when they want to be within the organization. Are leaders looking at intrapreneurship, seeding ventures within and empowering younger people to take leadership roles in there?
I did that 25 years ago. I left a cushy job to come and say, I want to do something on my own. And I have to say, it's been a delightful experience. And I also have to say that through that experience, I have learned the art of empowering people. We have a famous saying in Ambit, we are aggregators of entrepreneurs in this organization. Because the power of an entrepreneur, honestly, and if you can somehow translate that and transform individuals from thinking like just paid employees into some of the qualities of an entrepreneur, the sense of ownership, the sense of belongingness, the sense of loyalty, I think spurs to a completely new level. So I would think the best way to leverage talent today is to make them have a sense of ownership and empowerment. Now, ownership, of course, also comes through equity and options and everything else. But I think empowerment is a more important piece. And I think if you can get people to think like entrepreneurs, I think in today's competitive world, where landscapes are changing at the speed at which we are changing, you're probably more likely to succeed and have more nimble-footed people who are more resilient than honestly just treating people like employees and they can go anywhere and do a job.
I think we have time for one last question, and I have to ask you about it, which is to do with DE&I, taking forward the talent conversation ahead, and there's a huge backlash in the US when it comes to DE&I, and just wanted to understand from you, Mr. Krishan, what really is your take? Does too much of DE&I focus impact meritocracy?
Well, I think first of all, responding to your question, I think we have to figure out what works for us. On the one hand, we go in multiple forums and we say that, and I'm just talking about, let's just start with gender, that the more women we have in the workforce, India's GDP could double, quadruple, and so on and so forth, right? And we see the benefit of having more and more women in our workplace. We have seen many of the transformation that have been done, particularly on the sustainability side. I was reading a statistic somewhere that many of the sustainable startups have more women employees than men employees. And now, if that is what is our strength, why will we not leverage our strength? So just because something is happening somewhere else does not mean that I need to change tracks. I certainly think that that's a strength that India has. It is under leveraged at this point in time, and it's been proven over the last 20 years that there has been more and more women coming into the workforce, that we need to do more on that count than less. And I think not just the education system is supporting it today, but also I think the society is starting to support it. And I don't think we should look back, because this has taken us some while to get here. So I think that's my first thing that I would say. The other piece that I would say is also when we think about diversity a little bit more broadly, and I think that's been discussed today as well. I think the diversity of talent and diversity of thinking is also very, very critical. And just we were talking about the horizontal mindset, etc. How will we get that until we are exposing ourselves to, let's say, seven or eight different themes which should come our way and which will cause the conversations, like Ashok just said. I think that also is extremely, extremely important. I mean, the traditional way, certainly when I was growing up, there were four things that you could do. You could either be an engineer or a doctor and so on and so forth, or an accountant or whatever. I think today, look at the opportunity that is there, and I think we need to celebrate it.
Correct.
If people fail a few times, let it be. I think we need to celebrate it. Whether we do it intra or outside, etc. We should celebrate it. Today, the society is a little bit better off, etc. Businesses are doing better. I think we need to celebrate some failures to actually savor the successes that many others will get.
Yeah, and just quickly, I wanted to add this thing on to what Sanjeev just said. We've recently done, in my hat on Bombay Chambers, so so in the Bombay Chambers Vice President hat, we've done a report on Viksit Bharat. We've actually, it's a very concise report, I think you should. So to give a number on this, if we are able to get all the women who are educated in India, who then choose not to work, to get them back to work, the estimation done by the agency who's worked with us, the impact could be upwards between 1 to 2%, 1.5% of GDP growth. So I'm saying, so therefore, staying focused on just this simple piece, is the one quick point I wanted to make, on gender diversity, in my opinion, is itself this thing, and forget what the dialogue is happening elsewhere, and therefore, and what the other elements of diversity, as Sanjeev rightly spoke about, we are a diverse country, frankly. Therefore, some of these, we have grown with it, that comes naturally, but I think focusing on a few specific areas would be very helpful, and I think that journey should continue.
So Mr. Wadhwa, is India better placed than the global companies, I mean, than America and other developed markets to drive the DEI agenda? Because at some level, it is part of our ethos.
You've spoken about DEI in two contexts, in context of meritocracy, and I think we cannot compromise meritocracy. If you want to be a successful nation, you cannot compromise on meritocracy. At the same time, I think we have to accept, as Sanjeev said, everybody has to have a license to err, right? And I don't think there is any one gender that is more capable of erring than the other gender. And if you take that as a base case, there is absolutely no reason why you should not have equal men and women in every organization. I mean, if the number of people going and getting educated, and that's where we need to go back. We need to go back to the education system and say, are we qualifying equal number of people from different genders to be able to at least have an opportunity? And so long as they're equally qualified and they have an equal opportunity, I see absolutely no reason why we should not be an equal bias institution.
Anupriya,
I think there's
what about others?
There's a lot
I mean,
more,
DEI is not just women.
Yeah.
No,
It is
yeah.
LGBTQ,
But even
it
in
is
women, which is like a very
PWD.
basic thing, I think there's a lot more needs to be done.
Yeah.
And it is not just that, if 50% of the population is women, they're going to get equal opportunities. The world doesn't operate like that. And if we want that contribution to the GDP, for example, then we need to work towards that. It doesn't happen automatically. So, like for example, a lot of organizations do. I can talk about our organization. We run, for example, at scale programs like, the unconscious bias that sets in. As growing up, we have seen this, that if there are, a lot of times how are human beings? They like to be, our first choice is to be with people who are like us. So whether it is, which region you belong to, and hence gender, and hence, all the other things like what kind of food you eat, and you can relate on that, or what. So culture and all of that. So that's a hardcore wiring. And so it needs a lot of, unconscious bias kind of training. Firstly, for people to even recognize that there is a bias. To Sudhanshu's point, like, we hold massive at-scale returnship programs for women in tech who've taken off because of, either they've got married or they have kids, and now they want to come back, but the organizations are not open for that. Including, for example, when we are hiring people, and to your point, yes, it is not only gender, it is everything else as well. When we are hiring people, we ensure that are we having enough representation from various parts. And of course, to Ashok's point, meritocracy is very important.
Yeah.
So this whole is towards ensuring that everybody has as much of an equal opportunity as possible. That being said, meritocracy has to be important, because if you're not going to be running a successful organization and you're not taking great decisions because it is all just sort of, then it's not going to be a great economy.
Before we wind up, we are at the end of our allotted time. I wanted to go around the panel and ask each one of you the top 3 things you think every leader should now focus on quickly in 30 seconds. Mr. Wadhwa first.
I would say don't forget the old values, that vision and culture are prevalent in any environment. They were true yesterday, they are true today, and they will be true tomorrow. So focus on values and culture in every organization. AI and technology is at your doorstep. You like it or you don't like it, it's going to open the door and walk inside. So please prepare on how it's going to disrupt you and get yourself, accustomed to what the challenges are. And 3, you must have a vision and you must have a business plan. You must have a vision and you must have a strategy. But your business plan has to be nimble-footed enough to change every year, and if needed, every 6 months.
Anupriya?
I would say one is empathy, because that's the starting point of ensuring that you are learning everything fast and you're curious. The other would be that when you have to carry people along. And there was a time when decision-making strategy was pretty like a leadership thing. But today, the people that you need to have in the room when you're doing all of that, obviously, are people coming from very diverse backgrounds. So technology is your CHRO part of that, is your, so it's not only this thing, but you have better decision making. Even your partners, stakeholders, clients, all of those are important in terms of this thing. And third, of course, what we discussed is this whole thing about unlearning and learning. I think it is one of the things that any organization, any leader will serve it well.
Sanjeev?
So I'll start with where Anupriya left. I think learning and skilling, I think is very, very important. And I say that because, and I just want to mention one statistic. There was a recent survey that we did, Jobs and Fears survey, which said that 50% of Indian employees are underskilled for the job that they currently have. So learning and skilling, I think, becomes very, very important. Second, I would say is change management, because I think things are coming to us very quickly, and I do think that at times we are not, able to change ourselves or adapt to the change that is coming our way. And the third one, which I certainly say, is inclusiveness, because it's very, very important that in any, to make any change successful, you have to be inclusive. Otherwise, it's bound to fail.
Sudhanshu?
Yeah, I would just build on, I think, what all of the panelists have said. I think one, to me, culture is very important. Ashok touched upon it. I think culture is the bedrock of everything. So therefore, continuing to build a culture which resonates with the kind of people you want to have, then tackles a lot of issues which we talked about today. So I think that is very important. Agility and adaptability, because you have to keep on, and you've got to be fast. There is no more time to sort of keep on doing things, but at the same time, be open to change and be adaptable. Agility and adaptability. And lastly, embracing technology. I think basically taking making sure that technology is your partner, because I believe every company is a tech company in today's day and age, and I'm saying irrespective of where you come from. So therefore, that's very important. Those are the three things, if you ask.
So leadership mantras from 4 of the best minds in the business. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for participating in this fascinating conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.